Hi everyone, my name is Melissa van Dijk, and in today's video I want to talk about dairy and acne, but not in the usual way. Now if you search this topic online, you usually get a very simple answer. Dairy may cause acne, especially skim milk or low-fat milk. And then the explanation is usually something like, it must be the hormones in milk, or the IGF-1, or the insulin response, or the dairy proteins. And before we get into it, yes, lactose intolerance exists. Some people do not digest lactose well, but lactose intolerance does not really explain why acne studies often point more strongly to skim milk, or why yogurt and cheese do not always show the same pattern. So I want to look at this from a different angle, because I think treating dairy as the isolated problem is very misleading. In real life, dairy is usually part of a much bigger meal pattern. I mean, you do not consume dairy in a lab. You do not drink milk in isolation while the rest of your diet is perfectly controlled. You eat dairy inside real meals, and those meals can look completely different. For example, plain yogurt with banana is not the same thing as a skim milk with cereal. A small yogurt side next to a whole food lunch is not the same thing as milk with a daily sandwich, chips and crackers. And yogurt sauce next to a home-cooked dinner is not the same thing as cheese, fries and a milkshake in a fast food meal. But online, all of this often gets reduced to one sentence: dairy causes acne. And I think that's way too simple. So I prepared a breakfast, lunch and dinner example so you can actually see what I mean. And I want to get started with breakfast to show you this. On the left, we have a plain yogurt with banana and a few berries. On the right, we have skim milk with cereal and also toast with jam in the background. Both meals contain dairy, but they are not the same meal. The yogurt breakfast is more self-contained. You can eat it with banana, other fruit, oats, or other potassium-rich foods. And that matters because potassium and sodium work together in the body. So if you are eating more potassium-rich whole foods, your overall diet may look very different from someone eating a more processed high-sodium diet. Now look at the milk and cereal pattern. The milk may not be the only issue. The issue may be what the milk comes with. Cereal can add refined carbohydrates. Toast and jam can add more sugar and sodium. And packaged breakfast foods can add even more sodium without you really thinking about it. And suddenly, milk is not just milk anymore. It is part of a processed breakfast pattern. So when a study says a skim milk was linked to acne, I think we need to ask, was it really the skim milk, or was skim milk acting as a marker for a certain breakfast pattern? Because skim milk is often used with cereal, shakes, sweet breakfast foods, or low-fat processed foods. And that is very different from a plain yogurt with banana. So the better question is not only, does dairy cause acne? The better question is, what kind of dairy, with what food, and inside what kind of full-day diet? Because that changes the picture dramatically. And lunch makes this even clearer. On the left, yogurt is not the whole lunch. It is just a side, often used almost like a yogurt dip or yogurt sauce, which I personally used to do a lot. The actual lunch is a more whole food meal with chicken, potatoes, tomatoes, carrots, greens, chickpeas, and banana as a side fruit. So here yogurt appears in a completely different context. It is next to foods that are naturally much richer in potassium and less processed. And this is why I think the sodium-potassium ratio is so important. A lot of modern diets are not just high in dairy, they are high in sodium and not high enough in potassium-rich whole foods. So when you remove dairy, you may also remove the foods that usually come with it, like cereals, chips, sandwiches, pizza, fast food, milkshakes, sauces, and processed snacks. And then it looks like dairy was the problem. But maybe your skin improved because the whole meal pattern changed. Now look at the other side. Here we have milk with a more Western lunch pattern. A daily sandwich, chips, crackers, pickle, and then the glass of milk on the side. Again, the milk itself may not be the full story. The meal around it may be much more processed and sodium heavy. So if you say I cut out milk and my skin improved, that may be true. But what else changed? Did you stop eating cereal? Did you stop eating packaged snacks? Did you stop eating sandwiches with daily meat? Did you stop drinking protein shakes? Did you stop eating cheese-heavy meals? And maybe most importantly, did your sodium intake go down? Did your potassium intake go up? And that shift can happen very easily without you even realizing it. Then this becomes a very different explanation from simply saying milk hormones cause the acne. This is what makes dairy conversation so confusing. Because if you eat yogurt with food, your overall diet may look completely different from someone drinking skim milk every morning with cereal. And if you eat plain yogurt as a side, that is very different from eating cheese-heavy fast food. But many discussions put all of that into one category, dairy. And I don't think that this is precise enough. And once you see this at breakfast and lunch, dinner makes the issue even more obvious. Because at dinner, dairy can mean two completely different worlds. So here you can see the same issue again. On the left, dairy appears as yogurt or yogurt sauce next to a whole food dinner. You have a protein, rice or potatoes, vegetables, and a small yogurt side. That is very different from the meal on the right. On the right, dairy appears as cheese on a burger and a milkshake, together with fries and a fast food style meal. Technically, both meals contain dairy, but they are not comparable. One is a whole food dinner with yogurt as a side. The other is a processed sodium-heavy, refined carbohydrate-heavy meal where dairy appears as cheese and a milkshake. So if this kind of meal pattern is linked to worse skin, is the problem really just dairy? Or is it the full meal environment? This is where I think the dairy acne research is often looked at too narrowly. A lot of the focus is on milk proteins, hormones, insulin, and IGF-1, because that fits very easily into the usual acne story, with hormones or production, clogged pores, and then a product to control the symptoms. And again, I'm not saying those things do not play a role, but I actually think the bigger issue is not dairy alone. It is the pattern dairy often comes with: chronic sodium exposure, not enough potassium-rich whole foods, and a much more processed full-day diet. So what if dairy is sometimes just traveling with that pattern? Skim milk with cereal, milk with packaged snacks, cheese with pizza, cheeseburger with fries and milkshakes, protein shakes mixed with milk, low-fat processed foods, sweetened breakfast products. That is a very different situation from a plain yogurt with banana, potatoes, tomatoes, avocado, carrots, beans, greens, or other whole foods. And sodium and potassium are not random minerals. They are deeply involved in fluid balance. So if your diet is chronically high in sodium and not high enough in potassium-rich foods, your body constantly has to regulate that imbalance. And I think this matters for acne more than we currently talk about. Because when you remove dairy, you may not just be removing dairy. You may also be removing the whole pattern dairy was part of. You may stop eating cereals, you may stop eating cheese-heavy meals, you may stop eating fast food, you may stop drinking sweet shakes, you may stop eating so many packaged and sodium-heavy foods without even realizing it. And if you replace those foods with more whole foods, more fruits, more potatoes, more vegetables, and more potassium-rich meals, you are changing the internal environment your skin has to exist in. And then your skin can follow. But that does not automatically mean dairy was the isolated cause. It means the full diet pattern changed. And that is the theory I want to leave you with. The dairy-acne connection is not necessarily about dairy alone. For many people, dairy can be the clue that points into the bigger pattern. Processed foods, high sodium, low potassium, refined carbohydrates, sweet drinks, sauces, convenience meals, and the same exposure repeated every day for years. So instead of only asking, does dairy cause acne? I think the better question is, what pattern does dairy come with? because when that pattern changes, the internal environment changes, and then your skin can follow. So I hope this video gave you a different way to think about dairy, acne and skin health. Not as one simple trigger food, but as a part of a much bigger dietary environment. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.